Okay, we're going to begin whether you're sitting down or not. You can listen well while you're standing up, but you can't talk anymore. That's the only problem. Our next speaker is Dr. Jennifer Brown. She's sponsored by Swine Innovation Port, one of the many sponsors that's made this meeting so economical and so educational for all of us to bring people from all over the North America to speak to us today. Dr. Brown did her PhD in pig behavior and ethology at the University of Guelph. She's had an extensive background before then, but I'm going to leave you in suspense about that. She spent the last 9 years at the Prairie Swine Center working on, see if I stop talking, everybody else does. Working on sow behavior and particularly loose sow housing. She has extensive research background in mixing and social behavior of sows, and will you please welcome Dr. Brown.
Thanks very much, Tim. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here. Does the sound good in the room? Great, thank you. Seems a little loud up here. Laura asked me to mention to everyone, some of the first people that registered this morning didn't get the show bag. So there's a bag, and it does have some really nice information resources. I was helping on the organizing committee, but I did so from Saskatoon, so I didn't really have to do very much. But I did help to design these flowcharts showing the pros and cons of different feeding systems, and then a decision tree, we call it, a decision tree to kind of work through some of the decision-making process around deciding on a renovation and deciding on the different feeding systems. So those resources are in your bag, so if you didn't get one, they're still at the registration desk. Please pick one up. So yeah, I appreciate the opportunity to be here, and in contrast to the hands-on producers that we saw earlier today, my area is pig research, and then I've done some work on sows and their social behavior. So looking a little bit on the social life of a sow, focusing on this problem of aggression and what happens when and why. So some of the research we've done in that area specifically. And then the strategies we've then developed for reducing that aggressive behavior at mixing and during the gestation period. Touching a little on relief in hospital pens. Our previous speakers have already given some of their ideas around that, and a couple of conclusions. So as an animal behavior person, we often look back at the original animals that our sows developed from, the European boar, wild boar. So what is their behavior like, and how have we changed that over time? So looking at wild pigs, every sow, they have their own group, a sounder, and each group has its very own specific territory. They'll have their offspring. The young males will emigrate from the group, but the females generally stay together, so it's a closely related group of female sows. And they will never mix with another group. They have their own social territory, and they would drive away any other groups. Unlike cattle and a lot of other species, where they, depending on their migration, they'll join together or separate. And then the boar joins the group, just agreeing. So yes, on the internet there's a huge amount of images on pigs. If you ever want to amuse yourself with pig images, there's no shortage. So here's another example of a beer stein in the shape of a sow. So yeah, looking at our sow today, certainly we've made some changes in domestication, but she's largely the same animal that originated in the wild. We've got our very highly developed maternal lines, our Yorkshire Landrace maternal lines. We call them hyper-prolific. So we've really focused on that productivity of those sows. They eat, they milk, and they make a lot of piglets. So we've done a very good job at that. But certainly, if you look at moving them out into groups, a lot of these stall house sows, they certainly are lacking fitness, poor legs and feet. We haven't done a very good job at selecting for conformation. If you've seen them, some of those big sows as they go down the hallway, they're doing the runway walk. It's not a good locomotion. And then again, based on being in stalls for multiple parodies, they've got some very poor social skills. So yeah, is she ready to go to work in a group and get along and find the feeder and the drinker, make her way up to that feeder? Certainly there's a lot of things we can do to prepare the sow and prepare the system that's going to work for her. So touch on some of the background and the science here. Certainly there are some upsides, and we saw, so Scott mentioned some of the fitness benefits. Clearly fewer stillborns. That's one of the most common findings we found in many studies here. And also in some work that we've done at Prairie Swine Center at the University of Manitoba as well. We saw that influence on the number of stillborns, and I've got a slide later on it. Some earlier studies also showed increased bone strength. So they had sows that were in stalls or in groups for up to 8 parodies, and then they took the femur and the humerus, the arm and leg bones, and actually broke them, and found 30% greater bone strength in these group house sows. The effects on lameness certainly have been debated, and it depends largely on the system and the quality of the flooring. But certainly there can be improvements in a good system based on increased fitness. And studies on longevity, Leanne Huber has said that she's going to be looking at that, and it's certainly a question, but we don't do a lot of research on longevity because it requires that long time frame. But we do expect to see some improvements there, and again, it's going to depend on the system. And anecdotally, certainly we've seen some reports that sows are calmer and easier to handle, so moving them to a farrowing crate can be easier, and certainly some workers say that they do prefer working with sows in groups. If you enjoy working with animals, you can see those individual differences among the sows, which is sometimes amusing and enjoyable to watch. But of course, that's only when we've got it right and it's working well, and you're not dealing with daily headaches. Because clearly, yes, the downside of this system is that competition that goes on among sows, because they are restricted fed, and there's going to be that competition for feed, but also for other pen resources. So those injuries and lameness that we see, and certainly in most cases, it's the sows that are at the lower end of the pecking order that are the ones that are suffering the most, as was clearly shown in Sylvain's video of the sow at the back of the pen not being able to make it to the feeder. So this is not something any of us wants to come across. So some science around aggression. Certainly this has been a focus of a lot of research. What causes it? What can we do about it? So clearly there is a genetic basis for aggression. So there's individual variation in the aggression that animals show. So we would call it a personality trait. So that's it's a characteristic of an individual that's consistent over time and across situations. So yeah, we could say it's a very individual trait, and it's also heritable. And we would say definitely, like all personality traits, some level of aggression is a positive thing, right? If you can't stand up for yourself, who else will? So sow needs to be able to protect herself and to protect her offspring, but certainly there are limits there. And we recognize now that there's also breed variation, not just individual variation, but breed to breed, different levels of aggression can be found. And certainly a geneticist who's now at Purdue University, Dr. Bill Muir, has theorized and done a lot of work with this. Most of his work was with the poultry industry, but his work has also been applied to the swine industry. And so he came up with the concept that certainly our methods of selection, selecting animals, has resulted in our generally picking the dominant individuals. And often, because we are housing animals in a competitive system, the dominant individuals are the more aggressive individuals. So inadvertently over time, we have been selecting for greater aggression just by our selection procedures, by picking those winners. So we inadvertently, we didn't deliberately do this, it's happened inadvertently, and we now need to find selection measures to move away from that and find a more passive sow. So the good news is, from a management perspective, that there's things that we can do about this. Sows can learn, they can learn better social skills. There's ways of managing them before they get to gestation to improve those skills. And certainly by exposure over multiple gestations, yes, they can also learn too, but the ideal is to develop some of those skills before they hit their gestation. So one of the main questions that comes up, and we've seen it in some of the discussions this morning, and it's still, I'd still say it's a question that's under debate, is smaller, large groups. And I think this is an area where in science, yeah, we've got some evidence on both sides of the story, and so I think it'll be an interesting area to watch. So I'll talk to you a bit about the theories around that. Certainly, our views have changed over time, and I don't think they're fully formed yet. So back in the 1990s, we had a lot of concerns about large groups. Could we put animals in large groups? Sandra Edwards is one of the authors here, a very noted pig researcher, and they quoted in this paper, larger groups will have more hierarchy positions to resolve, and therefore more fighting, because a bigger number, everybody's got to work at their place. So they just stated this as a statement of fact, that there would be more aggression in a larger group. But then, as we know, certainly looking at on the poultry side of things, and also in our larger ESF pens where we've got over 300 sows, these large groups are working really well. We're not seeing, the cannibalism and the levels of aggression that you would have predicted based on that statement. So what's going on there? So Marion Dawkins, a noted animal behavior person in the UK, she's used economic theories to explain a lot of animal behavior. So what is the cost and what is the benefit, the cost-benefit ratio of different behaviors. So looking at the group size question, she said the cost of dominance is certainly going to increase as the group size increases. If I've got to be the boss of all you, I got a lot of work to do, right? So what happens then is that in larger groups, animals are showing increased social tolerance. So it'd be like comparing a small town to a city. If you're in a small town, sure, maybe you could be the biggest person in town, and your hockey team is going to beat the next town's hockey team. But if you're in a city, yeah, you're going to ignore most of the people that you see on the street and carry on with your daily activities. Simply because, yeah, fighting the work that's involved in establishing social dominance is not worth the effort. So there was some research done on this in finisher pigs, and it would apply also to sows, I think, the principles. So looking at large and small groups of finisher pigs, and this was done by Tusa Samaracone and Harold Gonu, actually at the Prairie Swine Center, published in 2009. So what we had in Elstow, Saskatchewan, we had a large start to finish barn, and they created pens of 18 or 108 pigs per pen. So these large group pens and small group pens. And then they watched them through the finisher phase. And then they took 2 pigs from each pen and remixed them at 1 week, 6 weeks, and 12 weeks after placing them in these pens. So they would take 2 pigs from a small pen and put them in another small pen, or they would take 2 pigs from a small pen and put it into a large pen. They also would take 2 pigs from a large pen and put it into a small pen, or 2 pigs from a large pen and put them into a large pen. they would do this for 2 hours and then they would put them back where they came from rather than, letting them tough it out. So that they observed them and videotaped them and saw what levels of aggression they had. So here's the percent of time that the pigs spent fighting in the 2 hours after they were mixed into these groups. So small to small, small pen to a large pen to a small pen, or a large pen to a large pen. And certainly, these are not significantly different. So that's the percent of time that they're spent fighting. So it only ends up to be a total of 2.5% of the time, but certainly these large pen group pigs that went into a large group had significantly less aggression. They came from a large group, they went into a large group, nobody really noticed. It wasn't a big deal. So that certainly helps to explain why our large groups are working. But certainly you see that there are a lot of people that are good proponents of small groups. Tom Stein, who works with Giga, he's mentioned small groups are good. Some of the Danish researchers, they prefer to work with those smaller static groups instead of these large dynamic groups. So what benefits do we see with small groups? Certainly they're static, so you've got no changes in composition over gestation, so that could be a benefit. You don't have that removal of some and adding others. So that's more stability in the social order. And then particularly if those animals have been familiar. So certainly we know, animals that are familiar from a previous gestation, often they do have a pretty good memory and are familiar with those animals again when they are reintroduced. And so that can be a benefit and certainly help to maintain the social order. As I say, the word is still out there, and it depends on the studies you look at. But a lot of people ask, what is the ideal group size? Say if you have a static group, and I would say it clearly depends on the farm design and the management of that system. So with competitive systems, certainly we have some other numbers thrown around, but 15 to 20 sows with competitive feeding. But then when we get to the moderate group size, certainly if you don't have the resources available for the animals, you're going to see more competition, because even at 60 sows, the social hierarchy will still be quite clear, and the subordinate animals are definitely always the ones that are going to suffer if there's any shortages of resources. So looking at the dynamics of aggression, when are the sows fighting? So we basically studied two different periods. You've got that initial mixing aggression, but then you've got that ongoing aggression that might occur over the duration of gestation. So basically we're sorting out different kinds of problems in these different types of aggression. So specifically at mixing, what is the issue we're sorting out at mixing? We all know. Who's the boss? What's the hierarchy? Social rank. That's important, Even on a human level, if in your own close personal groups, we all kind of have an idea of what the social rank is. So some other terms for social rank. Certainly you'll see pecking order, social status, dominance order, hierarchy. Yeah, this is key to any social group of animals, and that's got to be sorted out. So we're not going to get away from that, but certainly there are ways to manage it, as we'll get into. So here's one of my questions. So we've got the pull out your cell phones if you've registered for that whatever it's called. Slido. Which system has the lowest aggression at mixing? So would it be the floor feeding with small static groups? Would it be electronic sow feeding with a large dynamic group? Or would it be a free access pen with medium-sized static groups? got some responses here. And the ESF one is popping up there. I actually have some data on this. Lori Connor, where are you here? Oh, I got some of our data on this, Lori. We've been working hard on this question. Great. Let's go back. So, here we go. So we had floor feeding, ESF, or free access pens. So, I would say floor feeding, I think no big giveaway here. Dominance has value in this situation. There's something to compete over, and there's limited avoidance space. So that's where we would see greatest aggression. ESF, I would say, it would be more moderate. Certainly, it's a large group, so we can expect that sows are going to adopt this more passive social response, and there's room to avoid others. So that's pretty good. Free access, certainly, we have free access pens at Prairie Swine Center. They're very flexible in terms of doing research in stalls or in groups, and certainly sows can easily avoid others by retreating to their stalls, and so we don't see very much aggression in that system at all. Part of it could be genetics as well. So here's some of the data that we've gotten. Barn 1, that is our free access system at Prairie Swine Center. Barns 2 and 3 are ESF, so this one is ESF on partially slatted concrete. This one is ESF on a straw bedding, and this is the level of aggression on day 1 of mixing versus light gray bars are day 2. So you can certainly see, yeah, the big event is that dark bar, and we've got aggressive interactions and the frequency per hour. So on that first day, 14 to 16 fights per hour, compared to in that free access system, 3. So definitely some differences in aggression depending on the system. And we do also have some differences in genetics. As I say, this is one genetic group, and this is a different type of genetics. So that may also be a factor that we can't really control for here. So yes, ongoing aggression, that's going to take place throughout gestation, and can certainly have a greater long-term impact if it's not addressed and managed. So that's going to be maybe a more important concern. So what are the sows fighting about with ongoing aggression? So here's another question you get to weigh in on. Our second and last question, I promise. What are sows fighting about with ongoing aggression? Is it who's the boss, who gets to eat, or who lies in the best spot? Kind of a trick question. All right. Who's the boss is still up there. Great, thanks. So yeah, neck and neck there. Who gets to eat? Who's the boss? Let's talk a bit more about that. So certainly that's part of it, maintaining that social status. Get out of my spot, because I'm the boss. But it was largely determined at mixing, so it's what we call an avoidance order at that point. You know, I look hard at you and you're going to move. I don't have to fight with you, I just have to look at you. But who gets to eat? Yes. And who lies in the best spot? Who gets what? These are all turf wars. They're fighting over who gets to control feeder access, who gets to control, who gets out of the exit to the feeder, who gets the best lying area. So like Sylvain was saying, all the subordinate sows are. Am I using up all my time? Okay, noted. So yeah, these are turf wars. These are sisters sharing a bedroom. It's not that pretty. They're fighting over whatever they've got. So at mixing, certainly we've got the environment, the space allowance, the design of the pen, the use of enrichments, as we noted in the code, and we've seen some pictures. At mixing, certainly, there's going to be less fighting on a full stomach, so a lot of people, feed an extra feed before mixing, and that's always a good plan because nobody really wants to fight on a full stomach. Time of day has certainly been studied, and certainly the thought is that you mix late in the day, you're going to have a little squabble, sleep it off, and the next day, hopefully things will be better. But actually, in fact, we find they wake up the next day and finish their squabbling, so it hasn't been that effective, hence the question mark here. Use of odors, we've all, there's been a lot of studies looking at odors, and specifically the odor of boar on reducing aggression, but the results are highly variable. Some people have seen a mild effect, some people have studied it very hard here at the University of Guelph and didn't see any effect. So I'm not saying it's not worth trying or looking into, but certainly the results haven't been that strong. With the ongoing aggression, certainly we're trying to minimize competition. But that's where our husbandry skills come in. We've got to figure out where is the problem, what are they fighting over. So that's observation is really critical there. So as noted before, don't overcrowd your feeding systems. That's when the subordinate's not going to get in there and get her ration. Space allowances, avoid tight constricted spaces. You don't want that feeder area to be in a tight area. So in Sylva's design, you wanted that 10-foot area around the feeder to be clear so that animals can get in and nobody can just lie there and dominate the entrance. So that's why we say, 10, a minimum of 8-foot alleyways, so animals can get around and outsmart the bullies. And then that partition length, certainly in those feeding stalls, we've shown that if you have a longer feeding stall, that's going to reduce the aggression. You're going to see less changing of feeders from 1 minute to the next if they have to commit to actually moving into a longer feeding stall. But yeah, I would point out that sows generally prefer to avoid conflict whenever possible. So it's sometimes some researchers have called it an avoidance order, not a dominance order, but an avoidance order. And so having a distance to move away from the aggressor is very important. This was an early study done by Australians, and they just compared the shape of the pen, whether it was square or rectangular. So we had 24 sows in a group at a fairly low space allowance, 1.4 meters squared, and the sows, certainly in the rectangular pens, showed less aggression and laid together sooner after mixing. And based on their observations, they concluded that the fighting was reduced because the subordinate could actually move further away from the aggressor. And also that apparently they like that long wall to lie against there. We call that stigmotaxis. They like to lie against the surface whenever possible. So yeah, just the simple shape of the pen had a significant effect on aggression. But I would emphasize that certainly space allowance is very important. And but of course, adding more space is costly, so we have to find that breaking point below which, if you crowd them anymore, you're definitely going to see adverse effects, such as greater aggression or greater dropouts, the loss of pregnancy. And I would say the code recommendation of 19 to 24 square feet for sows is very good. I do think, 20 square feet is a fairly sweet spot, but again, they give it this range because it also varies with the kind of system you've got. If you've got small groups, you need the larger space allowance per sow. If you have larger groups, you can lean towards the lower space allowance because there's more space sharing, especially if you have a nice bedroom area where sows are segregating and lining up there. I'll show a little bit of data here, but I think I'm running short of time, so we'll rush through some of this data. Certainly looking at mixing times, So that had some data on this too. So here's some stillborn numbers just showing you what happens with the different parities. So here, this parity 1, this is a score. So all the gilts are in this category 1. First and second parity sows are here. Third and fourth here, and fifth and greater are over here. And a lot of these aren't significant differences, but you're seeing the late mixing group, that's mixed at roughly 30 days after breeding. Mixing post-insemination, so that's just right after, within days after breeding. And early mixing, these sows were mixed right out of farrowing, right at weaning. So you certainly were seeing more benefits of this early mixing at in the older sows and in our first parity gilts. So yeah, it's an interesting effect, and we're trying to understand how that happens. What happens early on in gestation that's causing this reduction in stillborns. So I think I'm close to the end here. We have a couple of slides here, just pictures. And here's an alley. That's no way that's 8 feet. But because we've got these nice bedroom areas, sows are using that solid flooring for lying, and that's making this narrow walkway actually work for this producer. It's a retrofit, so that's what he had to work with, and he's making it work by having those nice solid bedroom areas for lying. And again, here's another picture of the Europeans, the short walls. So again, that helps with airflow. You can see the sows better, and so they don't need to be this big 4-foot wall to lie against. Some enrichments. So we've got some disc chains, some well-chewed feeder disc chain, 2x4 in a metal holder that can be easily replaced. Again, here's sows at Prairie Swine Center. Sam, my maintenance guy, says he doesn't really like the wood. He's finding chunks of it in the pit. But they do prefer the cotton rope over the wood, so haven't had any problems with rope yet. And I would emphasize, yes, we do need hospital pens, so don't forget to include those. And here's my conclusion. Certainly, some aggression is going to be unavoidable, but certainly we can manage it. Each system is going to have its challenges, so you need your observation and husbandry skills to say, yeah, there's something going on here. Go in and watch the sows, find out where the problem is, and be prepared to adjust either your grouping practices, aspects of the pen design, or your daily management. Thanks very much.
We do have a number of questions that came in on the computer for Dr. Brown, but I learned one thing from her presentation, which is there's more aggression on an empty stomach. So in order to get everybody to lunch, we're going to hold the questions for Dr. Brown till the panel discussion. So we'll wait for that. Thank you.